Whispers in the Bennington Triangle. I first heard the phrase Bennington Triangle over a tavern jukebox that refused to die. The vinyl spun out a waltz, but the old ranger beside me hummed a funeral dirge instead. When I asked what haunted his thoughts, he spoke the name Bennington like a man spitting out a tooth, then leaned so close the kerosene lantern painted his cheeks with flickering scars. "Those mountains remember," he rasped. "Remember better than any man ever could. Vermont's green mountains look gentle if you stand at a postcard distance. They roll, moss-soft, beneath skies the color of foregone promises. Yet the closer you walk, the more the earth changes tempo. Roots cross the path like knuckled fingers. The wind turns hollow, as though it's moving through the corridors of an unseen house. Between 1945 and 1950, 5 souls, each with a different compass, a different dream, stepped into that labyrinth of pine and stone and never returned. No avalanche swallowed them, no river carried proof downstream. They are simply absent, an arithmetic of loss the forest keeps tallying. Locals draw the triangle's crooked geometry with a fingertip on beer-slick bar tops. One corner at Glastonbury Mountain's cloud-snagged peak, another near the still waters of Somerset Reservoir, and a third at the sleepy town of Bennington, where church bells toll but few venture into the high timber after dusk. Hunters who can read a snapped twig the way you and I read headlines will not step past the ghost village of Somerset once the light bleeds gold. They whisper of lantern-bright orbs that pulse like trapped hearts above the canopy, of voices that mimic the living with uncanny tenderness, of something they only call the presence, an appetite older than names. I've walked those trails under a waning moon, felt the hush grow viscous around my ankles, heard my own breathing turn foreign in my ears. I've stood at the stump where a lost hunter's lunch tin rusts shut like a clenched fist, and I've read the brittle pages of search reports that smell of mildew and hopelessness. What you're about to hear is what I gathered. Testimony, rumor, fragments of nightmare, stitched together in the voice of a man who has spent too many nights eavesdropping on a wilderness that talks in riddles. Lean close. The forest does not repeat itself, but it echoes, and echoes are how old stories find new throats. Chapter 1. The Last Path of Midi Rivers, November 12, 1945. Picture a dawn the color of tin. Frost glittered on Hell Hollow Brook like ground glass. Midi Rivers, 58 years old, shoulders knotted from decades of timber drag, a pipe clamped between his teeth, led 4 younger hunters along a game trail he'd known since boyhood. He was thin as a sapling, yet moved with a muscled certainty that made the others relax their guard. The narrator inside my skull can still hear him mutter, "Stay in my boot tracks, boys. Mountain'll change its mind on you twice before noon." They laughed, the jittery snorts of men eager to prove themselves, but they obeyed. Midi's blaze-orange cap bobbed ahead, a single ember in a forest of dark trunks. They reached Bickford Hollow by midday, a saddle between ridges where every sound, crow-caw, rifle bolt, heartbeat, returned distorted, as if the air were made of cracked mirrors. Midi passed around steel flasks and jerky, then pointed toward a ridge crowned with hemlock. 10 minutes, Scout," he promised. "Coffee'll still be hot when I'm back." He crossed an old stone wall, the crumble-boned remains of a 19th century farm, and walked into the trees. 20 minutes passed. The coffee skinned over. One hunter made a joke about Midi chasing a phantom buck. 40 minutes. They hollered his name. Their echoes ricocheted off an emptiness so thorough it felt constructed. Search parties converged within hours. Deputies in felt hats, firemen with lantern poles, college volunteers singing to keep fear at bay. They combed 25 square miles over 5 days. Snow fell, melted, fell again, blurring tracks into hieroglyphs. They found only 3 things. A brass cartridge Midi had reloaded himself, unfired, lying atop a stone as if placed there for counting. The broken stem of his spruce sweet pipe snapped clean, edges strangely charred though no fire had burned nearby. Boot prints that continued for 12 strides beyond the moss bed, 12, before stopping dead amid undisturbed needles, as though a staircase had opened in thin air and he'd ascended without resistance. Bloodhounds arrived from New Hampshire. They picked up his scent, then skidded to a halt at the 13th stride, howling, hackles lifting as if electricity bled from the soil. They refused to cross an unseen border no human eye could chart. Night after night, the forest started talking. A logger on the south spur of Glastonbury raved about blue lights that drifted uphill, defying gravity and good sense. A widow on Chapel Road locked her shutters after a voice that sounded like her late husband begged her to follow the moonlit trail behind the house. And Sheriff Riley, whose skepticism was legend, told me decades later that they kept finding lengths of yarn, scarlet, emerald, sun yellow, tied to low branches like breadcrumbs for something that already knew the way. Each string ended burned, he whispered, eyes rimmed red. No matches, no ashes, just curled black tips. He blinked then, and I swear I smelled smoke, though his office was cold. Midi Rivers became the first domino. The forest, having stretched, began to reach. Chapter 2. A Scarlet Scarf in the Snow, December 1st, 1946. 18-year-old Paula Jean Weldon kept her dorm room like a crow's nest. Feathers of notes pinned to every corkboard, pockets of half-scribbled poetry stuffed into coffee mugs. Finals week loomed, but beyond the frosted window pane the season's first snow gleamed under a shy sun, and adventure beckoned. Paula wrapped a bright red scarf, hand-knitted, her mother said, loose with love, around her throat, tucked her notebook in a rucksack, and told her roommate she'd take a brisk walk along the long trail to clear her head. Witnesses placed her on Route 9, thumb extended in cheerful defiance of campus rules. A gravel truck driver named Louis Knapp recalled how she laughed when the ventilation knocked loose a puff of coal dust, tracing an invisible map on his windshield with one gloved finger. He dropped her near Woodford Hollow at 2:45 p.m. and watched her stride uphill, crimson scarf fluttering against the white like a cardinal's wing beat. Dusk comes early under the evergreen cathedral. When Paula failed to sign back into her dorm by 9 p.m., the college assumed tardiness. By midnight, her bunk radiated absence like cold iron. At dawn, bloodhounds, dogs that dream in scent, caught her trail but lost it at a fork, where the long trail dives under a hemlock roof so thick noon turns to twilight. Investigators found fresh footprints leading upslope, then a sudden drag in the powder, a scuff, a sideways skid as if the ground itself had wrenched her into a different angle of reality. Beyond that, the snow lay virginal. The governor dispatched National Guard planes. They droned above like dispassionate insects, photographing miles of unbroken canopy. On the ground, volunteers fanned out, calling her name until their throats bled. Reporters arrived, spinning theories of secret lovers and clandestine bus tickets. Locals folded their arms. They knew the mountain's appetite and its silence. Strangeness multiplied like bacteria. Children in Woodford began waking with nosebleeds after claiming a woman hummed lullabies beneath their floorboards, melodies that froze mid-phrase into shudders. An aging trapper stumbled from the bog south of Glastonbury, coat torn, eyes orb-wide. He swore he'd seen a girl in a red scarf standing hip-deep in black water, skin the pallor of moonlit birch, eyes glossy as obsidian. He raised his rifle. She lifted one finger to her lips. The trapper felt a rush of wind and woke 3 hours later on his back, rifle missing, ears ringing with a single word: down. He died of pneumonia within the week, repeating that word until breath failed. Then came the footprints. Tiny replicas of Paula's boots appeared overnight on improbable surfaces. Rooftops, bell towers, windshields, always pointing back toward Glastonbury's summit. Sheriff's deputies photographed them, dusted for prints, found nothing but powder fused to shingles. Decades later, I spoke with Paula's roommate, now gray-haired and living in a Florida condo far from snow. She kept her balcony windows locked even in July. "Sometimes I still hear her," she confessed, voice quivering. "On stormy nights, she brushes the screen like she's sweeping off snow that isn't there." She opened her palm, revealing a straight pin bent into a perfect spiral. "Found this on my pillow the morning after she vanished. Looks like the pin she used to fasten that scarf. But it was rusted, like it had lain in the rain for years." She closed her fist once more, and for a moment the condo smelled of winter pine. Two vanishings might suggest coincidence, but the forest was only clearing its throat. The next disappearance would prove the triangle had a rhythm, and it was keeping time with hungry patience. Chapter 3. The Phantom Passenger, December 1st, 1949. 3 years ticked past, quiet on paper, but the triangle's hush felt stretched, like the drum skin of a snare waiting for the next strike. The blow landed on the 1st of December 1949 as winter's grip began to tighten. James Everett Tetford, Jimmy to the army buddies who'd watched him escape German shells, boarded a northbound bus in St. Albans, Vermont, bound for the Bennington soldiers' home. At 56, Tetford carried the weary dignity of men who have looked death in the face and asked it to wait. Witnesses remember him settling into the back row, duffel between his boots, reading glasses perched low as he unfolded a pocket Bible. The bus squealed from snow-dusted curbs, gathering 12 passengers for the long haul south. Roadside diners glowed like portals in the night, a neon succession of coffee steam and jukebox lament. Each stop, the driver collected tickets, nodded to Tetford, exchanged veteran jokes about bad chow and colder barracks. The last stretch from Burlington to Bennington snakes through valleys where moonlight slips like silver mercury across frozen streams. Inside the coach, the heater clicked its uneven metronome. Passengers dozed. The driver, Ollie Braitz, later filed a statement. "I kept seeing the headlights glance off wet branches, looked like wires thrumming over the windshield. I blinked, and for a second I thought I saw sparks. Must have been tired." At 8:50 p.m., the bus hissed to a stop outside Bennington Station. Passengers shuffled down the aisle, 11 of them. Tetford's paperback Bible lay open on his empty seat, reading glasses folded as if by careful hands. His duffel rested upright in the footwell, straps buckled. The conductor, presuming the veteran had stepped off unnoticed at an earlier whistle stop, logged the luggage as unclaimed. When orderlies at the soldier's home reported Jimmy missing, an inquiry traced the route. Every passenger sworn and re-sworn. Tetford was there after the last scheduled stop, seen reading under the flicker of roof lights. He had not risen, had not spoken. Somewhere between the sliding shadows of Route 7 and the terminal's welcoming lamps, the veteran dissolved. State police dismantled the bus's interior, hunting trapdoors. None. They weighed the duffel. It matched standard issue, heavy but unsuspicious. Inside, spare uniforms, framed photographs, a Purple Heart ribbon tucked in a shaving kit, and a single undeveloped roll of film marked Glastonbury 1919. Developed weeks later, the negatives bled with chemical ghosting, but one frame stood clear. A younger Tetford kneeling beside a forest creek, helmet off, staring at something in the water. Behind him, half hidden by laurel, rose a silhouette pronged with antlers or branches, or perhaps outstretched fingers. The dark shape was featureless, save for two starved white voids where eyes ought to be. Orderlies began waking cold, swearing they'd seen Jimmy pacing the ward at night, speaking in Morse code bursts. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. SOS. One insisted the ward radio, long dead, crackled a broadcast on frequency 1480 AM, bus terminus, last call for, before drowning in static. Local legend estimates that by New Year's 1950, the triangle itself grew by a mile in radius, as though absorbing the distance Jimmy's bus traveled while he sat unaware. Cartographers scoff, but hunters showed me survey markers grown crooked, lean to shelters now swallowed by underbrush impossible to sprout in a single season. I interviewed Ollie Braitz at a rest home decades later. His pupils trembled when he met my gaze. "Thought I'd passed a hitchhiker in uniform," he said, "on a stretch where no road shoulder exists. Looked in the mirror and saw the whole bus was empty, like they'd all left. Then my eyes cleared. People were back, but Tetford, gone." He wept like brakes screaming down a mountain. That winter, post boxes across Bennington received anonymous cards adorned with a single image, an empty bus seat, Bible open, beneath it the words, "Not taken." Claimed printed in charcoal. No fingerprints, just smudges that smelled faintly of pine pitch. 3 disappearances knit a pattern the way teeth knit a bear trap. Glastonbury mountain slopes began to hum in the dreams of anyone who lived within eyesight. A low vibration like a distant engine always idling. And December had only started. Chapter 4. The Boy in the Red Jacket, October 12, 1950. Autumn arrived like a confession that year. Trees bleeding copper, mornings brittle with frost. In the cab of an aging dump truck, 8-year-old Paul Jepson pressed his nose to the glass while his mother idled by the hog pens on the outskirts of Bennington. She fed swine for local farms, and Paul, quick-smiled, bird-boned, tagged along when school released for harvest break. The boy loved the color red, said it could outrun nightfall, said cardinals never got lost because they carried daylight in their feathers. At 3:05 p.m., and while his mother hefted grain buckets, Paul hopped from the passenger seat wearing that bright red jacket. Oink choruses masked his footsteps. A minute later she glanced back. He was gone. No slow fade, no crunch of leaves, just absence, as though an editor had cut him from the reel. The farm sat within sight of Glastonbury's lower ridges. Police arrived before dusk, boots sinking in leaf rot. They scoured fence lines, expecting to find the boy chasing chipmunks. Nothing. Bloodhounds picked up his scent near the pig pens, followed it to the edge of a logging road, and then froze, whining at a patch of grass uncrushed, as if the trail leaped from earth to sky. That night searchers lit flares. The forest answered with lights of its own, cool spheres floating between trunks, drifting against the wind. Volunteers called Paul's name. The orbs pulsed brighter, their glow revealing shadows that twitched independently of any body. One deputy fired a warning shot. The lights winked out, plunging the search party into such darkness their flashlights seemed to swallow rather than cast illumination. Whispers spread. Some claimed the presence favored the color red, that it could spot scarlet threads from miles away like arterial blood calling to a predator. Old-timers spoke of Civil War deserters who'd vanished in similar coats, of a colonial child lured from a quilting bee by invisible hands. Over radio static, Sheriff Riley patched through to State HQ. Request additional K-9 units. Area demonstrates unusual electromagnetic. The transmission cut, replaced by a child's voice humming a lullaby out of tune. Operators at the other end swore the signal wasn't theirs. The next morning, the mountain greeted searchers with fresh snowfall, rare for early October. Boot tracks vanished beneath the white, but tiny barefoot impressions, 5 toes, narrow heel, spiraled outward from the spot Paul disappeared, climbing the hill toward Glastonbury's abandoned railway. They measured half the size of Paul's shoes, as if his feet had shrunk, or he'd been joined by something juvenile yet inhuman. A recovered pocket knife belonging to Paul's father surfaced near the tracks. Its blade was open, sticky with sap and a substance that fluoresced under blacklight but defied lab categorization, neither blood nor plant resin. The handle bore gouges translating in rough Morse to 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots. SOS witness accounts turned carnival strange. A milkman swore a boy in a red jacket flagged him near the highway at dawn. He slowed. The boy lifted an index finger to his lips, eyes void black. When the milkman blinked, the child was simply not there. No footfall, no fade, just the empty shimmer of heat rising off asphalt. Meanwhile, Paul's mother dreamed each night of standing ankle-deep in a river, her son on the opposite bank. Between them knelt a towering silhouette of antlers. No branches, no razored arms, and the water running between was not water at all, but a hissing stripe of radio static. After 7 days, the official search ended. Reporters penned headlines, "Boy swallowed by Bennington." Locals held vigils but left a lantern unlit on the church steps, symbolic acknowledgement that some lights invite the dark. Yet the forest was not finished speaking. On the 8th dawn, children walking to a one-room schoolhouse found a red jacket draped over the boundary stone of the old Glastonbury cemetery. No footprints marred the dew. The fabric was warm, like fresh from a dryer, and smelled of pine sap and iron. Inside the jacket pocket a note waited, written in block letters with childish unevenness, "Not gone, taken, trade not complete." Beneath those words, smaller, "Listen for the whistle." At precisely 3:05 p.m., the time Paul vanished, every railroad crossing bell within 30 miles clanged once, though the tracks had rusted silent for decades. The presence had upped the stakes, claiming youth and declaring unfinished business. Winter would soon seal the mountains in ice, but the hunger beneath the pines was thawing into urgency. Chapter 5. The Returned Silence. October 28, 1950, May 12, 1951. 16 days after Paul Jepson vanished, while the last echoes of his red jacket still drifted through town gossip, Glastonbury tightened the noose again. Frida Langer, 43, sturdy and unspookable, camped at Somerset Reservoir with her husband Max and cousin Herbert Elsner. A seasoned hiker, Frida treated the mountain as a familiar sparring partner, respectful but never afraid. Dawn crept across the reservoir like ink unfurling through water. Ducks muttered. Mist clung to the lake's skin, rising in tendrils the wind failed to tear away. At 11 a.m., Frida and Herbert set out on a short trek along Deerfield Brook. The air smelled of wet cedar. Half a mile in, Frida slipped crossing a log, soaking her shoes and pants. She laughed, wrung water from her braids, and told Herbert she'd jog back to camp for dry clothes. He watched her stride downhill, humming, an off-key ditty only she recognized. That melody faded behind the pines. Silence plugged the gap like wax. 10 minutes later, Herbert reached camp. No Frida. Max, still mending tackle, swore she hadn't returned. They searched the immediate radius, tent, trail, brook banks, finding nothing but a single wet footprint on a moss-slick rock, already drying. By sundown, 80 volunteers combed the drainage basin. State police deployed aircraft, the Civil Air Patrol joined, the Vermont Hiking Club mapped grids. Dogs sliced through underbrush, noses lifted. They traced Frida's scent to a point 50 yards from the spillway and stopped cold before a wall of air humming like a bee swarm. One German shepherd yelped, bolted, refused to track again. Rain turned to sleet. The search ran for 2 weeks, 300 men at peak, far larger than any prior effort. They scoured shoreline, drained beaver ponds, even detonated small charges to stir silt on the reservoir bed. No sign. Sheriff Riley ordered underwater drag lines. Nothing surfaced but deadfall logs charred black, as if by lightning that never struck. Winter locked the mountains in glass. Snow muffled memory, and still every night at 11 p.m. The hour Frida slipped, campers reported hearing a woman's voice humming a broken tune, accompanied by faint splashes, as though someone walked the reservoir surface in the dark. Spring thawed the silence. On May 12, 1951, a fisherman named Lionel Wade beached his rowboat on the reservoir's north shore, eager to clean perch. He stepped onto sand and screamed. 20 feet away lay a body, skeletal hand raised as if signaling for rescue far too late. Flesh clung in strips, clothing hung like flags on ruin. Yet the investigators who arrived noted something stranger. Despite 6 months exposed to predators and freeze-thaw cycles, decomposition was minimal, as if time itself had stalled. The face was unrecognizable, but dental records confirmed Frida Langer. Cause of death could not be determined. Bones showed no break, organs too degraded. Stranger still, that section of shoreline had been searched repeatedly, its sand raked. Either the body had moved or had been placed after thaw. Max Langer, grief-pinned, asked to see his wife one last time. The coroner refused until identification completed. Reports leaked. 4 fingernails on Frida's left hand were torn off post-mortem, as though scraping rock. Under UV light, examiners saw faint fluorescent smears on the surviving nail. Lab analysis revealed an unknown compound rich in calcium carbonate, composition similar to cave flowstone. Most chilling was what lay clenched in Frida's right fist, a wet pine needle twisted into Morse, SOS, the same code haunting Tetford's ward. At the funeral held under iron skies, the church organ malfunctioned, grinding out an off-key hum that froze congregants mid-hymn. The same lullaby Herbert recalled Frida humming before she vanished. The minister killed the power. The pipes fell silent. Minutes later, the organ exhaled one last chord by itself, in E minor, said to resonate with sorrow and prophecy. In the days that followed, hikers reported fresh boot prints, Frida's size, appearing along Deerfield Brook, only to terminate at the precise spot her single footprint had dried months before. Locals began to believe a trade had indeed occurred. The presence returned a body, but kept whatever animating spark it valued most. And by giving something back, it hinted there was still a debt owed. The newspapers finally coined a headline that stuck. Bennington Triangle demands tithes. Summer approached, but no one felt warmth. Glastonbury remained a barometer of dread, its barometric pressure dropping toward a storm no meteorologist could chart. Chapter 6. The Choir of Static. July 4th, 1951. Summer in Bennington should have smelled of cut grass and barbecue smoke, but that July the air tasted metallic, like licking a battery. Independence Day fireworks cracked above Main Street while the forest answered with its own silent flares, pale orbs weaving between treetops, seen only in peripheral glances. I returned to town then, hired by the Bennington Banner to write a retrospective on the disappearances. My editor wanted closure for tourists. I wanted the opposite. Truth, raw, and glistening. I checked into room 7 at the Greylock Motor Lodge, its walls thin as promises. Each night I listened to the radio, dial sweeping for late-night jazz. Instead I found static, steady, hypnotic, threaded with almost voices. On the 3rd night the static broke cadence. 3 quick pulses, a lull, 3 long wails, another lull, ... SOS. Then a small boy's whisper. Listen for the whistle. The line went dead. I stared at the speaker until dawn burned the curtains gold. The whistle in the pines. Locals claimed an abandoned logging tram once chugged up Glastonbury's south face. Its whistle had fallen silent in the 1920s, but hikers still heard it on moonless nights. Sheriff Riley lent me a topo map and caution. Don't chase echoes. I packed a recorder, compass, flashlight, and Paula Weldon's case file. Her final trail notes photocopied grainy. The trailhead greeted me with hush. Even cicadas seemed to hold their breath. 1 mile in, my compass needle began twitching, spinning like a dervish before fixing south-southwest, opposite magnetic north. The forest felt pressurized, as if the canopy sagged closer. branches almost brushing my shoulders. At 11 p.m., Frida's hour, the whistle came, a single distant keening that trembled the needles underfoot. It sounded rusted, fatigued, yet insistent. I pressed record. The sound bled onto tape, accompanied by low choruses, multiple voices humming Frida's lullaby, slowed to funeral tempo. Light flared ahead, 5 lantern-white spheres drifting upslope. They moved with purpose, aligning themselves into a crooked pentagon. Suddenly they snapped inward, merging to one brilliant strobing core. My recorder squealed, the tape smoked. The whistle cut mid-note, replaced by a child's giggle, pause, and a veteran's cough. Tetfords layered atop each other until identity blurred. I ran. The midnight depot. Panting, I burst into a clearing and found the impossible. A train platform shrouded in vines, iron rails half submerged in loam. A single lamppost flickered, revealing a sign overhead. Glastonbury Depot, last call. No such station existed on any map after 1897. On the platform sat an empty bench. On the bench lay a red child's jacket, neatly folded, still warm. Next to it, Middy River's pipe, intact, bowl glowing ember bright though unsmoked. And Tetford's Bible, spine cracked open to Exodus 14:19, and the angel of God, which went before the camp. The page edges fluttered though no wind stirred. I stepped closer. The lamppost dimmed, casting everything in sodium twilight. From beneath the platform rose a chorus, hundreds of voices chanting the Morse rhythm, 3-3-3. The planks vibrated, dust shivering loose, then silence thick and absolute. Beside the bench now stood a silhouette, antlered, branched, indeterminate. Height impossible to measure, it seemed to extend beyond seeing. 2 void white eyes opened, bleaching color from the scene. My lungs forgot to work. The presence lifted an arm crowned with twig-like fingers and pointed, not at me, but at the items on the bench. Debt tallied, it murmured, voice like wind through dead leaves. Balance, unsettled. The red jacket burst into flame without smoke. The pipe split, ember dying. The Bible pages crisped black. I felt heat, but smelled only pine. The presence flicked its wrist. A folded ticket fluttered into my chest pocket, stamped, "Return fare." Then the platform, the lamppost, everything blinked out, like film frames excised. I stood alone in a normal glade beneath a bruised sky. The recorder, miraculously intact, ticked tape ends. Back at the lodge, I played the reel. I expected distortion. Instead, I heard a train whistle, clear and near. Then a conductor's echo. All aboard, standing room only. My own terrified breathing overlaying. Finally, that choir again. Voices weaving one word I'd missed in the woods. Repent. The town that didn't sleep. The next day, every radio in Bennington, car, diner, police cruiser, hissed the same pattern at random intervals. SOS. Sheriff Riley fielded 50 calls before noon. At dusk, the church bell tower tolled 13 times, though its rope had been removed years earlier. I visited Riley to play the tape. Halfway through, his office lights dimmed, filing cabinets shuddering. He slammed, "Stop," eyes wide. "You brought something back," he whispered, "and it's collecting." That night, lightning spidered across a clear sky, striking only the peaks that border the triangle. Each bolt, witnesses said, was silent, but every strike preceded a town-wide blackout lasting 3 minutes and 6 seconds, 333 seconds. Dawn revealed fresh signage at trailheads. Wooden placards burned with the outline of an antlered figure and 3 char marks beneath. ... The Forestry Service denied installing them. The fare. I unfolded the ticket given by the presence. It bore tomorrow's date and time, July 5th, 3:33 a.m., and a destination simply labeled Station Between. On the back, hand-inked, "Bring a witness or forfeit all." I thought of Riley, of the families waiting for answers, of you, listening now. The forest wanted payment, but perhaps, at last, it also wanted its tale told. Chapter 7. The Station Between, July 5, 1951, 3:33 a.m. The ticket's ink burned against my chest like a coal, though the July night was cool as Riverstone. Sheriff Riley met me outside the Greylock Motor Lodge at 2:45 a.m., hat pulled low, service revolver holstered but useless. He studied the crescent moon, said nothing, merely nodded when I handed him the return fare stub. "A witness, you said," he muttered. "Or we forfeit all," I answered. The streets were empty save for porch bulbs flickering SOS. 3 blinks, 3 darks, 3 again. No circuitry could explain. We drove in silence along a logging road that hadn't seen maintenance since before the war. Headlights carved tunnels through mist. At 3:13 a.m., the dashboard clock froze, though the engine purred. Static leaked from the radio, resolved into the lullaby Frida once hummed, then cut to a single command whispered in 5 overlapping voices: "Make the trade. Descent through folding space." We parked where the road dissolved into scrub. Compass needles spun drunk. The forest greeted us with the hush of held breath. 10 minutes till 3:33. We followed a game trail glimmering faintly, as if moonlight pooled in footprints we had yet to make. Each step felt doubled, like walking across a mirror. Pines leaned inward, their trunks bent at impossible angles, forming an archway riddled with fungus that glowed phosphorescent blue. Riley's boot brushed a toadstool. It rang like a glass bell. The note lingered, harmonizing with distant locomotive clatter. Ahead, the air shimmered, rippled, then parted. We emerged onto the same platform I'd seen before, but larger, rails stretching into blackness that devoured flashlight beams. A station sign, rusted, lettered in peeling gold, now read, "Station Between. Departures every century, arrivals when due." A steam engine idled, though no coal fire burned. Its boiler exhaled frosty breath. Its headlamp cast sepia halos through drifting cinders. Passenger cars flickered transparent. One moment oak-paneled Pullmans, the next skeletal ribs of some titanic beast. The whistle moaned once, a sound older than metal. Passengers of the uncollected. Figures milled on the platform, half-spoiled film prints of the missing. Middy Rivers straightening his pipe, Paula Weldon tightening a red scarf that fluttered though no wind blew, Jimmy Tetford clutching his Bible, Paul Jepson's small hand squeezing Frida Langer's torn fingers. Their eyes were luminous blanks, yet inside I sensed recognition. Souls trapped in photographs longing to bleed back into motion. They boarded in silence, led by the antlered presence cloaked in shadow. Its form kept rewriting. One moment branch, next moment bone, next moment railroad semaphore topped with a skull lantern. It regarded Riley and me with those twin, void, white eyes. "A witness and a scribe," it intoned, voice modulating like a radio dial spinning past distant stations. "Debt acknowledged. Exchange possible." Riley's jaw muscle twitched. He stepped forward. "I came to bargain." "Payment is memory," the presence replied. "Story power, fear distilled. Each taken yields echoes, sustenance, but imbalance festers. One soul volunteered can settle the account and spare the many." The conductor, a skeletal man in soot-stained uniform, punched our tickets. Mine tore clean. Riley's bled sparks. The choice. Clock hands somewhere struck 3:33 a.m. The train's doors chimed open. Heat lapped from inside, smelling of pine pitch and ozone. The missing gazed at us, their mouths moved in unison. "Let one stay." Riley removed his hat, placed it on my chest. "Tell them," he whispered. "All of it." Before I could protest, he stepped onto the car. The presence bowed, antlers scraping sparks off an unseen ceiling. The whistle screamed without sound, pressure in the skull, pain behind the eyes. The world strobed. I glimpsed vistas beyond windows, glaciers carving in reverse, deserts blooming with black flowers, cities made of mirrors swallowing sun. Riley's silhouette dissolved into flickering negatives. I lurched after him. A hand, Paula's, pressed against the glass from inside, palms scribbled with morse in condensation. The car lights strobed red, gravity inverted. I stumbled backward onto the platform. Exchange sealed. The presence decreed. Tithe satisfied for one error. Remember, or it begins anew sooner. Departure. The train began to roll, wheels grinding but silent, passing through me like fog, yet churning gravel when it touched the rails. Sparks fell upward. As the caboose crossed the threshold of dark, the entire station folded. Boards, benches, sign, into a single point of light that winked out, leaving only a ring of ash. In the resulting stillness, dawn birds began to sing. First time I'd heard them in weeks. Aftermath. I found myself clutching Riley's hat and his badge, now fused into a single piece of metal, warped by heat that left no burn on my palms. Inside the badge's hollow center lay the red jacket button Paul Jepson once wore, polished clean. Back in Bennington, town lights hummed with mundane electricity. Radios played jazz again. The church bell sat inert. Locals remembered the disappearances but spoke of them as tragedies past, the fear drained from their retellings, as though the emotions had been siphoned off. I opened my notebook to write, but the pages were already filled with words I hadn't penned, a full account of Chapter 6, penned in Riley's handwriting, ending with a plea. Make them believe. Memory is armor. I locked the notes away, knowing armor rusts if not used. This recording, my voice in your ear, is the first time I have shared it whole. The present said its hunger was stayed for an era. But how long is an era in the measure of mountains? Decades, years, or a breath held between heartbeats? Chapter 8. Echoes that Devour. July 5th, 1951, present day. Memory is armor, Riley wrote, a final instruction etched across the margins of my mind. Yet armor only works if worn. So I became the town's unofficial archivist, hoarding every clipping, every whisper, every radio wavering. But stories like rivers erode stone. In time, even iron recollections bleed into legend, then rumor, then tourist pamphlet. I watched that corrosion, helpless, as decades slid by. The quiet years, 1952-1970. For nearly 20 years, Glastonbury slept. No vanishings, no phantom lights. But I tracked subtler tremors. Hikers who returned blood-nosed after hearing train whistles underground, ham radio operators catching SOS bursts on weather bands, children drawing antlered stick figures at recess. Each incident was a hairline crack spreading beneath paint. I visited the reservoir twice a year, always at dawn, always alone. Each visit, the water surface bore fresh ripples, although no wind blew. Once I found a half-melted train ticket dated 2033, 82 years forward, pinned beneath a stone. On the back, crabbed script, interest accrues, static resurgent, 1971-1990. July 5th, 1971, exactly 20 years after Riley's departure, the church bell tolled 13 times again. Radios jammed with static of the lullaby. A hiker named Lorraine Johns vanished near Deerfield Brook. Her case echoed Paula Weldon's down to the red bandana around her neck. Search dogs halted before the same invisible wall. Authorities denied patterns. But I saw the debt awakening for collection. Building the archive, 1991-2025. I digitized every tape, every scribble, smuggling them onto the nascent internet. A hidden page, whispersarchive.net, hosted the recordings you now hear. But data too degrades, links rot, servers fail. Memory requires witnesses who care, not just bites. Present day, July 19th, 2025. You are listening because the presence allowed, or perhaps compelled, these words to reach you. My voice cracks. I am 93, bone-thin, lungs lined with cedar dust, but armor must be passed on before it rusts through. At dawn today, I returned to the glade where the station once unfolded. Moss has reclaimed the clearing, yet beneath the green I felt rail steel thrum, an engine stoking far below. I knelt. The earth vibrated in Morse. ... ... ... ... ... Nearby, a sapling grew twisted into antler shape. At its base lay a fresh, still-smoking train ticket dated 2051, exactly 1 century after Riley's sacrifice, stamped Final Settlement. On the back, Witness or Feast resumes. The choice returns. My breath faltered. I cannot live 26 more years. The presence knows. It demands a new witness, someone younger, whose memory may span generations, someone who will keep the armor polished. Friend, that someone could be you. The old tapes you've heard? They are only the first shield. The next is action. Share this story, upload it, duplicate it, translate it. Let no algorithm bury it. Visit, not alone, never alone, the trailheads. Photograph the placards. Compare them year over year. If the char marks multiply, the countdown quickens. Listen on July 5th. If you hear the whistle at 3:33 a.m., record it. Timestamp everything. Testimony is tinder. It burns fear into light. Beware the color red in the pines. Should you see a girl's scarf, a boy's jacket button, a soldier's Bible, document don't touch. Each artifact is a bill of exchange, thick with interest. Honor Riley. Leave a brass badge at Somerset Reservoir's North Shore every Independence Day. If it's gone by dawn, the presence has accepted your token, for now. If you felt the hairs rise on your neck while hearing this tale, the triangle already knows your name. Like this video so the algorithm cannot silence the warning. Subscribe and ring the bell, because on July 5th each year we live stream the reservoir at dawn, searching for the whistle. Join us. Be a live witness. Share this story with 3 friends tonight. Legend says passing the account in 3s delays the presence by as many days. Superstition? Perhaps. But superstition kept early settlers alive. Comment below if you have ever felt watched in silent woods. Each testimony adds a brick to our communal armor. I will soon board whatever train comes for me, ticket dated or not. Before I do, I place this recording, these transcripts, into your hands. Do not let them fade like cheap ink in rain. Because if memory fails, if fear grows fashionable again, the rails beneath Vermont will hum louder, the orbs will brighten, and the presence will step once more into our world, not to bargain, but to feed. Static rises, the lullaby plays. Then 3 sharp knocks echo, as if on an old wooden door. ... ... Will you answer?